Shalom, shalom, everybody. We are back for our second session, and we are going to go straight into Shemu'ěl Aleph, chapter 11, verse 14. And we know we've got till verse 22, but I think if we can just read 23 and 24 also, it will fit in nicely with summarizing this section. Okay. Kavleen, who's reading? Kavleen.
And Shemu'ěl said to the people, "Come and let us go to Gilgal and renew the reign there." And all the people went to Gilgal, and there they set up Shaul to reign before Yahweh in Gilgal. And there they slaughtered slaughterings of peace offerings before Yahweh. And there Shaul rejoiced, and all the men of Israel very greatly. And Shemu'ěl said to all Israel, "Look, I have listened to your voice in all that you said to me, and have set a sovereign over you. And now look, the sovereign is walking before you, and I am old and grey, and look, my sons are with you. And I have walked before you from my youth to this day. Look, here I am. Witness against me before Yahweh and before his anointed. Whose ox have I taken, or whose donkey have I taken, or whom have I oppressed? Whom have I abused, or from whose hand have I received any bribe with which to blind my eyes? Then I restore it to you." And they said, "You have not oppressed us or abused us, nor have you taken any bribe from anyone's hand." So he said to them, "Yahweh is witness against you, and his anointed is witness today, that you have found naught in my hand." And they answered, "He is witness." And Shemu'ěl said to the people, "It is Yahweh who appointed Moshe and Aharon, and who brought your fathers up from the land of Mitzrayim. And now stand still, so that I judge you before Yahweh concerning all the righteous acts of Yahweh which he did to you and your fathers. When Yaakov had come to Mitzrayim, and your fathers cried out to Yahweh, when Yahweh sent Moshe and Aharon, who brought your fathers out of Mitzrayim and made them dwell in this place? But they..." Sorry, did I read it right?
Yeah.
Let me just read it
You
again.
read it as a question.
Yeah, 18. When Yaakov had come to Mitzrayim, and your fathers cried out to Yahweh, then Yahweh sent Moshe and Aharon, who brought your fathers out of Mitzrayim and made them dwell in this place. But you forgot Yahweh their Elohim. But they forgot Yahweh their Elohim, so he sold them into the hand of Sisera, commander of the army of Chatzor, and into the hand of the Philistines, and into the hand of the sovereign of Moab, and they fought against them. And they cried out to Yahweh and said, "We have sinned, because we have forsaken Yahweh and served the Baals and the Ashtaroth. And now deliver us from the hand of our enemies, and we serve you." And Yahweh sent Jerubbaal and Bedan and Yiftach and Shemu'ěl, and delivered you out of the hand of your enemies round about, and you dwelt in safety. And when you saw that Nachash, sovereign of the children of Ammon, came against you, you said to me, "No, but let a sovereign reign over us," when Yahweh your Elohim was your sovereign. And now here is the sovereign whom you have chosen, and whom you have asked, and see, Yahweh has set a sovereign over you. If you fear Yahweh and shall serve him and obey his voice, and not rebel against the command of Yahweh, then both you and the sovereign who reigns over you shall follow Yahweh your Elohim. But if you do not obey the voice of Yahweh, and shall rebel against the mouth of Yahweh, then the hand of Yahweh shall be against you, as it was against your fathers. And now stand and see this great matter which Yahweh does before your eyes. Is today not the wheat harvest? Let me call to Yahweh, so that he sends thunder and rain. Know then and see that your evil is great, which you have done in the eyes of Yahweh, in asking for yourselves a sovereign." And Shemu'ěl called to Yahweh, and Yahweh sent thunder and rain that day. And all the people greatly feared Yahweh and Shemu'ěl. And all the people said to Shemu'ěl, "Pray for your servants to Yahweh your Elohim, that we do not die, for we have added to all our sins this evil of asking for ourselves a sovereign." And Shemu'ěl said to the people, "Do not fear, you have done all this evil. Only do not turn aside from following Yahweh, and you shall serve Yahweh with all your heart. And do not turn aside after worthless matters, which do not profit or deliver, for they are worthless. For Yahweh would not cast away his people, for his great name's sake, seeing it has pleased Yahweh to make you his people. Also, as for me, far be it from me that I should sin against Yahweh in ceasing to pray for you, but I shall teach you the good and straight way. Only fear Yahweh, and you shall serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider what marvels he has done for you. But if you persist in doing evil, both you and your sovereign are consumed."
Okay, so we already quoted verse 3, I think it is, yeah, from chapter 12 when we were looking at the Torah portion this morning. Similar words that Shemu'ěl was presenting to this, at this stage, a bit of a rebellious nation against Yahweh being their sovereign. And they wanted a sovereign just like the rest of the nations. So Shemu'ěl was upset when Israel asked for a sovereign, and Yahweh said, do as they say, because it was going to be shown anyway that what they're asking for will be shown that it's not Yahweh's desire, but it's the desire of their flesh, and they're going to see the consequences of them. So Shemu'ěl then takes the people to Gilgal to renew the reign there. And we know that when the people crossed the Yarden, they went to Gilgal, and this is where Yehoshua circumcised those in the wilderness that weren't circumcised at Gilgal. There was a clear picture of the covenant that was being established and renewed with that generation. And so everything was set up now for them to receive the sovereign, and Shemu'ěl makes these clear statements before them to say, if I've wronged anybody, if I've done something, then please. And they said, no, you've never robbed us, you've taken nothing from us, you've done. And he said, okay, now Yahweh is witness against you today, because here you've acknowledged that Shemu'ěl hasn't done anything wrong against you, yet you still want a sovereign. So by your own confession, this is a picture again where Moshe said to them that he's not done anything to them against them. He's never treated anybody harshly. He's never stolen anything from them or taken anything from them. So why was it that they actually were disgruntled with the leadership that they had? Here it was the same thing. Shemu'ěl, leader at that stage as a judge over Israel, they didn't like just listening to Shemu'ěl. They wanted somebody sitting as a king. And he's saying, but Yahweh's your king. But then, okay, then it's not because Shemu'ěl's done anything different, but Shemu'ěl was certainly Yahweh's appointed leader at that stage. So he said, okay, this is the thing. So I'm reminding you what happened in the wilderness. Yahweh brought Israel out of Mitzrayim. He appointed Moshe and Aharon, you know. And so remember what he did to your fathers. So he's reminding them of Korach's rebellion, and he's reminding them of what happens when you go against Yahweh's appointed order. So yes, Yahweh has now said, here's a sovereign, here's the conditions for a sovereign. Back in the Torah, Moshe reminded the second generation in Devarim when they were about to go into the promised land that when you ask for a sovereign, know that when you appoint a sovereign over you, he's going to enslave you, he's going to take taxes from you, he's going to, you're going to give him your all. And this is, so already Yahweh knew the hearts of the people, speaking through Moshe, and here comes this account. They want a sovereign, but he still gives the conditional clause. Okay, this is what you've said over you, but this is still the standard by which you should live. If you fear Yahweh, if you serve him, if you obey his voice, if you don't rebel against the command of Yahweh, then the sovereign who reigns over you and you to follow Yahweh your Elohim will go well. But if you don't obey and you rebel against the mouth of Yahweh, the hand of Yahweh will be against you, as it was against your fathers. So he's using this account of Moshe and Aharon in the wilderness that we've read today, and he's saying, remember what happened to them in the wilderness when the people rebelled against Yahweh's appointed leadership? Okay, so Yahweh's now given a sovereign. It's Yahweh that said have it. Here's Shaul. This is the conditions for the king. And it was in the Torah what the conditions would be for a king, and the king would have to write for himself a copy of the Torah so that he wouldn't rebel against it, etc. And so here the people are they're more excited about getting their own way, actually, than considering the consequences of their choices. And so he reminds them of the history of Israel and how they cried out to Yahweh when things went bad, and how they said, we've sinned and we've served the Baals. And Yahweh sent, Yerubbaal is another name for Gidon, and Bedan and Yiftach and Shemu'ěl. So all the people he sent to as deliverers, as saviors, as judges, to deliver them from their oppression out of the hand of the enemies. But as soon as they saw Nachash, who was one of the more prevalent, is that right? Prominent, that's it, thank you. Prominent sovereigns of one of their enemies, they were afraid. And this is where they said, please, we want a sovereign to go against this. And it's interesting, obviously, Nachash being the sovereign that they were trying to compete with. So it's just another shadow picture again of that anti-Messiah spirit and bringing fear and corruption and, oh, but surely you need this or surely you need that, as we see in this world, we're going to have people trying to draw us away from Yahweh, but Yahweh makes it clear. If we fear him, we serve him, obey his voice, and don't rebel against his commands, that's when we will have him with us, and we'll have his protection, and we'll follow him. And we should only follow Yahweh. And so Shemu'ěl says, okay, this is the conditions, but now this is what's going to be another sign for you today. Is not this the harvest, the wheat harvest? Now, we must understand the timing of the wheat harvest. It's from the period between the waving of the sheaf of the first during Matzot to Shavuot, because the 50 days of harvesting, you have your barley and your wheat harvest. And so obviously the barley first and then the wheat harvest. Now, in the days of the wheat harvest, there wouldn't typically be rain. And so Shemu'ěl asking Yahweh for rain and sending thunder. Firstly, the sound of thunder would remind people of what took place at Sinai. And then obviously we know in the renewed writings when Yahweh poured out his spirit on Shavuot and the renewal, there was thunder and there was tongues as of fire, coming down, and the sound of a rushing wind. So here we see a clear witness of covenant that's being established by this sign. This is a covenant that Yahweh does not break. So by you accepting these terms, you must be reminded of the voice of Yahweh. That's actually the one in control, not your sovereign, because Yahweh appoints all, and he's appointing this, but there's conditions with it. And so Shemu'ěl asked for, he called out to Yahweh and he sent thunder and rain, and this is what the people trembled at, because to get thunder and rain at this time of year was not something that was a normal, okay? Because if you're out, the rains have been finished before the harvest, and the latter rains would come later in the year. So this isn't typical rainy season during the wheat harvest. So sending rain would be a sure sign that this isn't just, we didn't expect to hear it rain today. This is a direct witness of Yahweh, that what's being declared here by the words of Shemu'ěl to this people and the conditional clauses that they have of them needing to submit to Yahweh through everything that's being established is very clear. And he said to the people, do you not fear? I mean, hearing the thunder that's sent by Yahweh in the rain, this should have sent fear and trembling within them. All the people, they said, pray to Yahweh for us. It's interesting how people who want what they want, everybody wants what they want, but people who want their own ways and the desires of their flesh, how they'll demand it and won't give up until they get their way. And as soon as they got their way and things are a bit rough, please pray for us. So, hold on, where's your system now? Where's your belief now? Why you want to cry out to Yahweh now when you didn't trust in him because you wanted your own way in the past? I mean, we were just talking about it recently, how often people would try and pray over Yahweh's will. Most people today, claiming believers, don't have let your will be done, not mine. People are trying to force their will on Yahweh, to pray long and hard about it, that they'll get their way. And like in the days of Israel, through the prophets, or the house of Yehuda and Israel, where Yechezkiel was told, answer the prophet according to what's in his heart, and the man, he's going to send a prophet and he's going to answer the person according to his heart, and what he gives you in your desire, it's not necessarily good for you. And this wasn't the ultimate plan for Israel, to give them what they wanted. But in order to teach them a very vital lesson, this historically we see as we learn from these events that are written for us as warnings that we don't fall into the same mistakes as our forefathers in covenant, is that we should be asking for no other sovereign but Yahweh and submitting to his ways. Now, when we submit to his ways, we are acknowledging that he has appointed leadership. Shemu'ěl was their leader at this stage. Why did they want somebody else? And before Shemu'ěl, there was, he says here, where is it? Bedan and Yiftach and Yerubal. All those judges that he had sent. All still a representation of the arm of Yahweh. As I said, in Yeshayahu, the arm of Yahweh has been stretched out, but then the Aramaic renders the prophets that have been sent. Because Yahweh's arm was revealed through those that he chose to bring about a message to stay in covenant or else. And so here it is the same thing. So the rain falls and the people are fearing Yahweh because suddenly it's a reality to them, because what they've asked for, they've been given with conditional clause. Because here was a covenant being renewed at Gilgal. So it wasn't just, okay, we can have a sovereign, now we can do what we want. No. There's no conditions of obedience to Yahweh that's changed. He said, there's a throne now which you've asked for, but the condition is still the same. Don't turn away or aside from following Yahweh, and you will serve him with all your heart. Don't turn after worthless matters. They don't profit. And Yahweh would not cast away his people for his great name's sake, seeing it's pleased Yahweh to make you his people. So he was acknowledging what you've asked for is not right in Yahweh's eyes, but he's guarding covenant. And you want to stay in that covenant, you need to stay in Yahweh. And Shemu'ěl said, I'm not going to sin by ceasing to pray for you. I'm still going to teach you the good way. I'm still going to proclaim the truth. But you need to fear Yahweh. But if you persist in doing evil against Yahweh, you and the sovereign are going to die. And I think this is such a valuable lesson still today, is that people think Yahweh changes. That when people moan long enough, they get their way. And that's how people in the Torah walk treat Yahweh. That if they moan long enough, that Yahweh will suddenly hear them. And we must be on guard against thinking we can twist Yahweh's arm to our own desires. No, we can't. The bottom line that we learn from this is we should be asking for nothing other than Yahweh's order, his headship and authority over us. And when we accept that, we accept what he chooses to lead us and to guide us and equip us and to teach us his word. Because if we don't, the consequences here are very clear. You'll be consumed. So this is all about establishing obedience according to Yahweh's prescribed order. And that's what Shemu'ěl was establishing. Because suddenly people are seeing, and it's becoming a reality, the voice of Yahweh. Then it's a wake up for them. But hold on, we sinned in asking for a sovereign. You've already asked for it. Now this is the conditions. And isn't that mankind at large today? We're going to read from Romans just now, and it's very clear. We need to submit to all authority is from Elohim. And we have to make sure that we are guarding our lives in obedience to him by not rebelling against authority that he's put in place. Any thoughts on this?
I'm just thinking that they knew that Yahweh was there.
Yes.
And then they decided they wanted it.
Mm.
And then it changes to not no longer our Elohim. It's now your
Yes.
Elohim and my Elohim.
Yeah.
But when something goes wrong, you pray to your Elohim.
Yes.
That my problems be solved.
Yeah. So it's a clear picture here that there isn't an intimate walk with Yahweh as a relationship of covenant. It was not being lived out. It was, they just saw sovereigns, we want a sovereign. So we want to be like the nations, where Israel was never meant to be like the nations. They were to be uniquely set apart, showing a belief in the creator of all that doesn't need to be visually portrayed in a seat of authority like the rest of the nations. And so it is a case of when we want what we want, it's our Elohim. And when we're not getting our way, please pray to your Elohim.
Let my wrong be right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we follow the pattern, there was the Levites
Yes.
who interceded, carried the burden for the people to be in the presence of Yahweh. Then they got into the promised land and they became like the nations. And then they started not doing
Yes.
what the word says, and the ark was taken. But if you think about it, Eli's sons were corrupt. But I mean, we were talking about if all the body is obedient, then everything will work.
Yes.
But now the people weren't obedient, so the Levites started taking bribes and started getting corrupt. And in a sense, you can almost understand it because people weren't doing what the word says.
Yes.
So everything becomes corrupt. They're already like the nations. Because I mean, it says they when Shemu'ěl got old, he put his two sons in charge and they did evil.
Yes.
They didn't do what was right in Yahweh's eyes. And then the people said, okay, give us a sovereign like the nations.
Yeah.
But they were already like
They
the
were
nations.
like the nations, so I'm going to give you what the nations are like. Yes.
The nations, they were sovereign. You acting like the nations. You didn't do what I said in the first place when you got into the promised land. Because in end of Shoftim, it says there was no sovereign in the land and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Then you get to Shemu'ěl.
Yeah.
I mean, there was never meant to be a sovereign.
No.
But it's like, you can't just blame the one. We talk about the whole pattern where everyone has a role.
Yes.
And if one arm doesn't do its part, everything becomes
That's what Shemu'ěl says.
corrupt.
When one part suffers, we all suffer.
Yeah. So and this is a exact picture of that.
Yeah.
People didn't do what was right in Yahweh's eyes, and then the priests also started getting corrupt, as priest, as prophet, as people.
Yeah.
You know, so one can't point the finger to the
Yeah,
other
they're
one.
all corrupt.
Yeah, because people sometimes when you're in a situation, we all do it. We tend to want to blame the teacher, the person in my life, the whoever for what is ever going wrong in my life. But if I'm in Yahweh's hands, then I can only look to Yahweh for what is going on in my life.
Yeah.
I can't start looking for what's that one doing wrong, or what's this one doing wrong, or who can I blame for this situation. And I think this is, so sometimes we see it in from one angle. But you're right, he gave him what they wanted because they were already living like the nations, and the priests were corrupt, and the people were corrupt. So the whole thing was, and it all comes back to what we read in the last chapter today of the Torah, it is everyone's responsibility to make the thing work.
Yes.
And then you must do your job.
Yeah.
Like I always told you to do it. Not do it or want to be that in that one's position, or like Dathan and Aviram and Korach and on. And so I think, that's my point. If we all do whatever Yahweh gives us to do, the thing will work right, and you won't have this where everything becomes what did you say?
Fiasco. I think the pattern that you say is happening is what's this nice flow in Scripture is that Yahweh was sovereign of Israel. He always is sovereign of Israel. And Israel becoming like the nations, doing what's right in their own eyes, following the ways of the nation, even though he sent judges and they'll have shalom for a number of years and they could fall away again, a new judge arises, Shemu'ěl comes, his children are just as corrupt. So Yahweh says, you know what? I'm going to let you have your sovereign. But it's not, because it's a way of Yahweh saying, even if you have a sovereign that you want, it's going to show that that's not going to change what you are in your evil before my eyes right now. And it was proven because he says, there's your sovereign. Here's the conditions. It doesn't mean that I've given you what you want. Now you can do what you want, because this is the condition, because not everybody's going to do right in their own eyes. You've asked for the seat of authority. I am your seat of authority, but you've asked. You like the nation, so I'm going to put it there as you've asked. This is what you've asked. And it's going to show that when you all do wrong, you're going to be destroyed. You and the sovereign. Then comes David, and Yahweh says, okay, now the throne, now I'm going to show you the throne that I am establishing forever. And that's the picture that we get in David, the beloved, the chosen that Yahweh is, as a reflection of him coming in the flesh to establish. Because it goes from a corrupt order that the people asked for, and Yahweh says, now I'm going to show you, this is a throne that I'm putting here on earth. And that was the throne of David that's established forever. So it just shows this progression. And the lesson that we have to learn from this is we must be careful of how we are demanding things from Yahweh, in a sense, when we are just simply to be doing our job. Doing what I think that you talked about, everyone doing their part. It's when you're not doing your part and you think you're trying to do somebody else's part. That's actually when you are not the right fit. So you've got time to grumble and moan because it doesn't, and that's where, if you're just doing what you're supposed to do, then you shouldn't be moaning about anything. But that kind of rebellion breeds and it infects and it spreads very quickly. And Colleen says everything gets corrupt. And it was from people to priest to prophet, they were all corrupt. And that was what Yahweh kept showing them. But he kept sending his prophets rising early, but nobody wanted to listen. So they appoint their own people. Here again, people are appointing their own sovereign. Give us a sovereign. Don't send your prophets. We'll have our own prophets. That was the sin of Yerovam. When it says here that he would destroy, where was it in verse, Yerovam, where was that? Which verse was that in? Yes, when the sovereign Yerovam, where was that? I can't think which verse it was in here. Where did we see that now? Sorry. It's just why I mentioned that is that Yerovam was the first sovereign of the house of Israel. We read Yarovam just now somewhere, didn't we? No. Okay. We're going to. Why did I think of Yarovam? Yeah, no, that's the prophets he sent. What I take from Yarovam as a rebellion against Yahweh that Yahweh said he would destroy is Yarovam did away with the Levitical priesthood and he appointed his own priesthood. He established his own appointed times and he brought about a corrupt worship. And that was again a reflection of the wrong way. Even Yahweh appointed Yarovam, but he gave Yarovam a conditional clause. He says, if you follow me and you walk in my ways, I will let you lead this nation and I will give you. But again, Yahweh, knowing everything, was going to show everybody that what you ask for is not always good for you when it's not in line with his will.
Because if everyone, we had a bit of a discussion over lunch, and some guy was telling Kayla how he's breaking the law and he's so proud, but he's saying, well, everyone breaks the law.
Yes.
So why does he have to keep it?
Yeah.
And this is the point, is if everyone is lawless, it goes everywhere.
Yeah.
You won't have a law-abiding society if you don't have law-abiding rulers.
No. No.
And that's why you can't really blame anyone.
Yeah.
Because it does run all the way down. And it's not like Yahweh didn't know he was going to put a king there. He said there was going to be a scepter in Yehudah.
Yes.
Until Yeshua
Yes. Yeah.
when we had Yehudah.
Yes.
So he knew they were.
Yeah.
It was always meant to be a representative of his rulership
Yes.
on this earth.
Yeah.
It's done the right way.
Yes. But here they were asking fleshly matters, and it shows that the fleshly matters, which is the origin of earth, is not good. It's according to the flesh. Whereas that which comes from above, which the pattern on earth is supposed to reflect, then it's functional and it's good. Just want to read from Tehillah 106, verse 15, when it says, verse 14 talks about when they greedily lusted in the wilderness and tried El in the desert, and he gave them their request but sent leanness within their being, and were jealous of Moshe in the camp of Aharon, the set-apart one of Yahweh. So it ties in with the history, Tehillah 106, of what we're going through today, but also tying in here. When Shemu'ěl called to Yahweh, and Yahweh sent thunder and rain that day, and the people greatly feared Yahweh and Shemu'ěl. Suddenly they feared Yahweh and Shemu'ěl when they heard the sound. But they got their way, but what was inside them was still a leanness of spirit, because it says they feared Yahweh, but they weren't willing to change and say, okay, well, And I think this is when Shemu'ěl, then they realized their mistake and said, okay, this is evil for asking ourselves a sovereign. In that moment, against the voice of Yahweh, the thundering voice of Yahweh, it was, okay, we're wrong. But there wasn't true repentance. And Shemu'ěl said, don't fear. You've done all this evil. You've done it. But here's your condition. You're going to serve Yahweh. And I think this is a state of the world today. We're in a state because of wrong choices and lawlessness. From the first man, we've all sinned. But even under the corruption on this earth, even though there are leaders and authorities over us, we must serve Yahweh with all our hearts and not turn aside to worthless matters. And this is where when we go, we'll read Romans now, and we see a lot of people on this Torah walk are struggling with the ability to submit to authorities.
Yeah, if you don't have a perfect heart, it doesn't matter if you have a sovereign.
No. And that's what Yahweh was showing them. Because he was giving them a reflection of what actually was on their heart. Anyway. Okay, let's go to Romans 13. Who's reading? Kayla. Okay. 1:7.
Thank you. Let every being be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from Elohim, and the authorities that exist are appointed by Elohim. So he who opposes the authority withstands the institution of Elohim, and those who withstand shall bring judgment on themselves. For those ruling are an object of fear, not to good works, but to evil. Do you wish to be not afraid of the authority? Do the good, and you shall have praise from it. For it is a servant of Elohim to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain. For it is a servant of Elohim, a revenger to execute wrath on him who practices evil. Therefore, it is necessary to be subject, not only because of wrath, but also because of the conscience. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are servants of Elohim, attending continually to these duties. Render therefore to all what is due to them, tax to whom tax is due, toll to whom toll, fear to whom fear, respect to whom respect.
This is a passage that I've heard over the years by many claiming Torah observant believers, that this is only in regards to being in subjection to governing authorities that walk in the Torah, and that we don't have to submit to our own law enforcement, or we don't have to submit to the country's laws that we live in, etc., because that's not what this is. And this is exactly what this is talking about. Shemu'ěl is writing to believers in Rome who were under the authority of Rome, and he's saying, submit to the governing authorities that you are living in, okay? And if you oppose that authority, you're actually withstanding the institution of Elohim. Now, what we are obviously very clear about is when a governing authority of man presents a situation to you whereby you will break the Torah, then you stand for the Torah. That's where your persecution for righteousness will be tested, which I'm not sure if many are actually ready for as yet. So, render to whom tax is due, toll to whom toll, fear to whom fear, respect to whom respect. There's a big, horrible movement through the world, called, I don't even know what it's called, but one of the names is the sovereign, what's it? Sovereign citizen movement, or whatever it is. And, and they want to talk about laws of the sea and laws of the land and all. They come up with a lot of things, primarily driven by people who aren't believers in the Torah of Yahweh, but yet many Torah observant believers are gripped by this theology, or corrupted theology of man. And they refuse. It's an ideology, not a theology. Ideology that kind of refuses to submit to any governing authority, claiming they have right to do whatever they please, but yet they won't pay taxes. They will certainly use the amenities that taxes are supposed to be used to pay for, but and they come up with certain terminology. I mean, people spend time learning the certain words or phrases that they're supposed to use, as if using these as incantations are going to suddenly get them free, So they can break a law and suddenly recite some line, and that's supposed to be against, they have no ability to govern you, And I think people are so led astray by this ideology, and sadly it's gripped a lot of believers today, and it's not a true representation of a light in the master. When we drive on the roads, we pay the taxes for the roads, we pay our car license fees, we make sure that we have a driver's license, we make sure that if I happen to break the law because maybe I found myself going slightly over the speed limit by accident, not on purpose, please don't never do it on purpose, or whatever reason, I'm not going to stand and say, because we get people on this, sovereign citizen movement. I don't know what's one of the names, but then, they'll have traffic fines. They're not going to pay it. They can take me to court. I will say this, this, and this at court, and they can't do anything for me because I've got an illegal, they don't acknowledge my authority, or I don't acknowledge their authority because, something about my birth certificate that's wrong and all these nonsense things, and they've taken money on my birth and all these nonsense. And I thought, where are you coming with all this rubbish? Let's get back to just being diligent servants, and what better way to submit to authorities while we are never neglecting our worship and service in obedience to Yahweh and his Torah as a light to many. Shaul and them never went into Rome. I mean, he was imprisoned. He didn't stand there and go, I don't respect your authority, so get me out of this prison. I don't deserve to be here. He was chained, and he was writing letters while he was in prison. So we must get over this ideology that thinks we don't have to submit to governing authorities. When the governing authority is pushing law for you to break the Torah, that's when you have the right as a child of Elohim to say, that is not my belief, like Daniel did in the days when he would not stop praying, and he would only pray to the Elah of Elohim, or to his friends who would not bow to a statue that was made, but would only pray to Yahweh. Do you think they were leaders, governors? I mean, Daniel was in authority, but when it came to turning from Yahweh, he would deliberately show who he serves. So we must learn that we obey the governing authorities. We pay tax to whom tax is due. If you're earning a salary, you must pay tax, what the thresholds and whatever the things are. If you happen to break a law, take responsibility for breaking that law. That's what the laws are there for, to protect you and also to be that which is against you when you break the law. And this teaches us a valuable lesson. And I think this is where a lot of people that have misguided their understanding of what it means to be an obedient servant of Yahweh. Because if you claim to love Yahweh with all your heart and with all your strength, but you are rebelling against other authorities by which you are responsible to for what they provide for you, then you are actually showing that you have no true love for Yahweh. Because, I could carry on, but very frustratingly about this topic. But I get urgent about this topic because we've had people come and go out of our fellowship over the years. And, we had one who didn't want to even pay the toll gate fees because, he doesn't. And then I read to him Romans 13, just give toll to whom toll is due and pay your toll. Stop fighting about it. You're using the road, And I do think that another aspect of this, small little things, it's the little details. As servants of the Most High, we should be upholding a standard of perfection. So we shouldn't be, a small example, we shouldn't be driving a car that's not roadworthy. But some will say, I don't have to submit to their road tests. I can drive. No, if your car's not roadworthy, you're putting other people in danger. I'm not going to drive a car if it doesn't have its paid up licenses, because it's not licensed to be on the road. Now, I don't have to put a different number plate on that says I don't submit to you. That's rebellion. And this is the ideology that must be done away with if true set-apart believers want to shine the light and be the salt of the earth. Ultimately, our authority is Yahweh, but we don't, in that submission to his authority, reject daily living standards by which we are governed in our various nations. Okay, that makes sense. Renee's saying, don't give Kayla any ideas about traffic fines. That must be a private thing between the two of you.
You pay your fines.
You pay your fines? Okay, so that's our readings for today, but what we decided at lunch, we would like to also read 1 Corinthians 9. We feel it fits nicely into all the readings that we've been doing today, so it's a nice chapter just to kind of summarize. So who wants to read? You want to read the whole chapter? Well, running in a way in which you should run and competing is all... Okay, who's reading? Jackie? Thanks, Jackie. Let me just get there. 1 Corinthians 9. You see, when we just decide to do an extra passage, it's exciting. Getting there. Okay.
Am I not an emissary? Am I not free? Have I not seen Yeshua Messiah, our Master? Are you not my work in the Master? If to others I am not an emissary, I certainly am to you. For you are the seal of my office, of the emissary in the Master. My defense to those who examine me is this: do we not have a right to eat or drink? Do we not have a right to take along a sister, a wife, as do also the other emissaries and the brothers of the Master and Kepha? Or do only Barnabas and I have no right to refrain from working? Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its fruit? Or who shepherds a flock and does not feed on the milk of the flock? Do I say this as a man? Or does not the Torah say the same too? For it has been written in the Torah of Moshe, you shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. Is it about oxen Elohim is concerned? Or does he say it because of us all? For this was written because of us, that he who ploughs should plough in expectation, and the thresher in expectation of sharing. If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap material goods from you? If others share authority over you, should not rather we? But we have not used this authority, but we put up with all, lest we hinder the good news of Messiah. Do you not know that those serving the set-apart place eat from the set-apart place, and those attending at the slaughter place have their share in the offerings of the slaughter place? So also the Master instituted that those announcing of the good news should live from the good news. But I have used none of these, nor have I written this, that it should be done so to me. For it would be better for me to die than that anyone should make my boasting empty. For if I bring the good news, it is no boasting for me, for necessity is laid on me, and it is woe to me if I do not bring the good news. For if I do this voluntarily, I have a reward, but if not voluntarily, I am entrusted with the management. What then is my reward? That in bringing the good news, I should offer the good news of Messiah without cost, so as not to abuse my authority in the good news. For though I am free from all, I made myself a servant to all in order to win more. And to the Yehudim I became as a Yehudi, that I might win Yehudim. To those who are under Torah as under Torah, so as to win those who are under Torah. To those without Torah as without Torah, but being without Torah toward not being without Torah toward Elohim, but under Torah of Messiah, so as to win those who are without Torah. To the weak I became as weak, so as to win the weak. To all men I have become all, so as to save some by all means. And I do this because of the good news, so as to become a fellow partaker with it. Do you not know that those who run in a race indeed all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way as to obtain it. And everyone who competes controls himself in every way. Now they do it to receive a corruptible crown, but we for an incorruptible crown. Therefore I run accordingly, not with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I treat my body severely and make it my slave, lest having proclaimed to others, I myself might be rejected.
This is a passage where, again, when Kepha said many twist the writings of Sheol to their own destruction, I mean, any of the writings of Sheol, people pick and choose and twist and try and present their own message that's not what Sheol was proclaiming. I've heard people say, yeah, I know you're asking for tithes and offerings. Look, even Sheol said he didn't expect it from anybody. And so they're twisting. That's not what Sheol is saying here. He is actually confronting the corruption that was happening in Corinth and the chaos that was happening. And he was basically saying, listen, am I not in a position that the master has called? Am I not also an emissary? If I'm not an emissary to others, I am to you. And you've acknowledged, you've seen, this is it. So this is where the word of Yahweh that he's brought to them, this is the authority that he's brought it by. And therefore, he says, is it only Barnabas and himself that has no right to refrain from working? So they had a calling to go and bring the good news. They were doing this. And he's basically saying, listen, you've seen armies. A soldier doesn't serve at his own expense. He gets paid for his service because that's what's required of him, and he does his duty. So anybody who plants a vineyard, don't they eat its fruit? And anybody who shepherds flock, don't they feed on the milk of that flock? I mean, they partake in it, so they become partakers. So he's saying, listen, do I say this as a man? Because he would use a lot of fleshly terminology to confront their fleshly ways then he's saying, listen, I want you to understand what I'm actually saying here. Because he also spoke quite clearly in a lot of parable style language, like our master. And he's then uses the imagery of don't muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain. And then he says, is it oxen that he's concerned about when he said that command? He used the imagery to highlight, if you muzzle an ox while it's treading out the grain, you're going to cause the ox not to be able to eat, so it will get weak and it won't be able to perform its function. So too the same, if you are shutting the mouth of those bringing the good news, and shutting the mouth by means of you're not providing something to go into their mouth to sustain them and provide for them, then you're not going to have the good news able to be sown or available to be sown among you. And that's when he says here, so if we've sown spiritual matters or seed among you, is it too much if we reap material goods for you? Now, this is important because a lot of times, a lot of people will relinquish their responsibility in their own choices and justification for physically paying tithes and offerings and gifts and contributions and voluntary offerings. And they'll say, no, I'll pray for you. Okay, but yes, thank you for your prayers, but your prayers don't put food on my table. I mean, Yahweh's the one who puts food on the table. That's what Shaul's saying. So if I've sown spiritual matters, then people think, okay, yes, we've taught us a lot in the spirit. Okay, I'll pray for you. No, well, get obedient with the physical matter. That's what he's addressing here. You need to make sure, that's why the master instituted that those that are bringing the good news should live off the good news. So when we are sowing spiritual revelation knowledge to you through the word, you need to show a proper obedience in bringing a physical contribution for that spiritual nourishment, And this is what Shaul is addressing here. He says, those who served in the set-apart place eat from the set-apart place, and the set-apart place must function. I mentioned Nehemiah 13 earlier, when in those days the Levites, like Carlene was saying just now, how did when everybody got corrupt, the priests also got corrupt because everybody was just trying to survive. And we shouldn't be living in we just want to survive mode, because that loses the focus on Yahweh. And when the focus on Yahweh, on those that are appointed to bring the spiritual food, is lost, then that spiritual food gets weakened or poisoned or corrupted. And what's fed to the people is what the false prophets and the false teachers were doing, muddying the waters, and that makes the people sick. And so you have this ripple effect. But when people just get back to being obedient, then the body flourishes. And that's what he was highlighting here. But because he says, I've used none of these, because I don't want to try and boast in it, this is not an excuse to say, you shouldn't, be like Shaul. He never asked for anything. He worked, and people say, Shaul was a tent maker, so he provided. They twist away. Shaul was highlighting, listen, he even mentioned to some assemblies, you have out of your poverty given more than the other assembly so that we could continue on. So Shaul was always teaching about the right order and making it clear, when it really comes down to it, obedience, the core of obedience can be witnessed in the fruit of one's lives by what they are contributing to Yahweh, actually, because everything else will flow from that. So when somebody isn't tithing and contributing and gifting correctly, then you'll find other aspects in their life that aren't actually in line with obedience to the word too. Now, I'm sharing this because Patrick phoned me at lunch and Patrick was telling me he's 82 now, his eyes are getting a bit dim, but he's listening and he's hearing, and he just kept telling me, don't stop talking about the contributions and the tithes. You must keep talking about it. I think his concern is the body needs to get obedient, because when the body's obedient, more people will get equipped. That's the principle behind it, And so Shaul is saying he's not using this authority to abuse. He's not saying these things to abuse his authority in the word. And so I echo that sentiment. When we're talking about tithes and offerings, we're serious about it, but Shaul wasn't begging people for their things, because we're not there to beg anybody. We're there to plead with people to be obedient, because there is a right for it.
I mean, if everyone is obedient, everyone prospers.
Yes.
Not just
No.
one.
Yeah.
part of it.
And when he starts going, oh, I became a Yehudim to Yehudim, and to the weak I became weak, and I became to a foreigner, one without Torah, and one... People think that he just did what others did. No, he met them at their level of understanding. So he could speak to people who maybe understood a bit more and speak to them on their, if you want to say, on their level or language, and he could relate exactly what was needed to be spoken to them. Those that maybe didn't understand a bit more, a bit weaker in the belief, he would come down to that level and say, listen, this is why, and that's it. Not that people just let it fly over their head and they don't understand what he's saying, but he would become to all men as they were, to help them understand what the word is. And then highlighting, if we are in a race, because Hebrews, which I believe Shemu'ěl wrote, talks about fixing our eyes on the Prince and Perfecter of our belief and running this race with endurance, throwing off everything that entangles. And here in Corinthians, he's saying, don't you know that those who run in a race, they're running it to receive the prize? I mean, if somebody's in a race, they're doing it for a goal. Now, that goal may be because I want to lose weight, or because I want to come first, or if I know, but you set yourself a goal. And that's what he's saying. You're running because you want to obtain the goal of what you're participating for. And that's why some might do it in the flesh for a corruptible crown. But what we are doing in the Master is for a crown of life that is eternal. Therefore, why do you want to neglect these moments in the flesh now in obedience to Yahweh? Because eternity is actually at risk.
If you get caught cheating, you get disqualified.
Yes. You know? And so he says, therefore, I run accordingly. And what is he saying? I run according to the way Yahweh's given us. And here I'm trying to set in order. This is what he was telling the Corinthians, or the believers in Corinth. I'm trying to set in order a proper functional body in the Master, which you are. And if I am setting this in order, you know what? I treat my body severely. In other words, I put to death the things of the flesh. What stops people from being obedient to actually giving the proper material goods to those who are bringing the spiritual word? It's because they are feeding themselves the material goods, because they are not treating their body severely in type, because it's me first. And it sounds aggressive, and Shaul might have sounded aggressive to the people here, but he was relating to them a very serious principle. And that is, when you start putting yourself above Yahweh, then you are going to put a big target on your back, if you will. And so we need to understand that everything that we've read about today, in closing with 1 Corinthians 9, it comes down to guarding ourselves against obedience to the authority of Yahweh's order. That's what it comes down to. Guarding ourselves against disobedience to Yahweh's order and his structure that he's given for set-apart living. And he has a clear order by which we are to learn and grow in. And I think this is a time where the Master is setting matters straight so that his bride is ready for his soon return. And so we've come out of a lot of chaos. We've learned a lot of lessons from rebellious ways. Some of us have been as rebellious as many of the people that we read of in Scripture. And this we need to make sure that we've turned away from and no longer engage in those rebellious ways, but submit wholeheartedly to saying, I want to do what Yahweh commands. And I want to submit to the way Yahweh has prescribed, because that's when you're going to flourish. That's when you're going to be prosperous in every way. And when you allow the word to be your light and your guidance every step. And treating your body severely and make it your slave. That's language of saying, I have to, because we wrestle against flesh and spirit constantly. Because that verse, if somebody's sown spiritual seed, don't they have a right to reap material goods for you? Because he's highlighting a thing. You can't sustain somebody with spiritual matters when they are feeding you spiritual matters. We're all fleshly beings, and the body needs to be sustained physically as well. So they go hand in hand. Any thoughts on today's readings? I hope what I'm sharing is making sense. And we always have to read context of letters or passages within letters to help understand what Shaul is presenting in his dialogue to an assembly that on the outset, it might have looked like they were flourishing, but yet there was a whole lot of chaos. There was a big fiasco going on, and he was trying to stop the fiasco, you know. And fiasco, again, means complete failure. So he's trying to warn people against failure, because we're running this race and we want to win. And we should be running as if we're winning, because in Messiah, when we stay in him, we will be winners. And the way to do that is to exercise true authority and submission to authority, so that we guard ourselves from breaking ranks. And thinking about a race, I'm sure all of you have, even in your primary school days, you ran races, that they made you stay in your line. They probably did you. And that's still the same message today. Stay in your lane, stay in your lines, you know. Don't look back. Because, yeah. So let's be people that are running with purpose and running with the only mission that is valuable, and that is to be set apart in the Master. And then Renee saying, indeed, jump your own hurdles. Yes, don't jump somebody else's hurdles, because you'll have to go back and jump your own again. And it's double work. Okay. I love the way Renee gets chirpy after lunch. Okay, but it's a good point. Jump your own hurdles, because not all of us are running this smooth race at times. There are going to be hurdles, but Yahweh gives us, but we need to get fit. We need to get trained. We need to exercise that authority. And if one is not submitting to governing authorities, how do you exercise proper authority toward Yahweh? So we started off with this Torah portion called Korach, bald, stripping away of the need to submit and the lessons that are learned in that, and coming back to Shaul, highlighting here, if you want to compete, you need to control yourself in every way. You know, because if you don't control yourself in every way, then you're not in control of the choices that you make. Yahweh is in control, but you're in control of your choices and what you do, and the consequences of your choices will also be revealed in time to come. So let's run for the incorruptible that we are running for. Amen? Because if we endure, we'll all be celebrating this incorruptible together. On that note, anybody want to share anything before we close off for today's readings? I just see there's a few people online. You're welcome to send any more hurdle comments. It's just Rochelle saying, pray we have a wonderful Shabbat together. It's in Minnesota. Nice to hear from you guys. Not sure if she's online now or watch the recording later. I think our brothers and sisters in the US are starting to head into colder weather. I know Antonio was telling me it's already started snowing, so I know it's getting a lot more difficult for you guys to get up at 3 or 4 in the morning to join us online. I didn't see Jillian on today, so I'm not sure if it's just the cold weather or she's going to join later. But even if you guys watch the recording of this, please know how encouraged we are that Yahweh is still connecting us his way, and that even though we might not be live together in the Master, we are seated, and that we can share these truths still in his presence and be able to have the joy and privilege. As long as we're able to connect his way, we keep doing it, you know. So encouragement to just keep running and keep running according to his rules, you know. Okay, let's pray. Master Yahweh, we thank you for giving us your word that continues to strengthen us and encourage us. And yes, we want to keep running. And in learning to endure takes a lot of effort. At first, it might feel like we don't have what it takes, but if we just press on and continue exercising, both physically and spiritually, as you said, physical exercises of some value, but reverence with contentment is great gain. So we recognize how we can learn many valuable lessons, even in the physical aspects of our lives, what that brings about in the spiritual. And so therefore we ask that you give us the ability to keep pressing on in endurance, and let endurance have its perfect work so that we lack nothing, that we have everything that we need from you to keep serving you with joy and gladness of heart, And I pray that you would continue to strengthen your body around the world to be united in the perfect unity of your spirit, that there's a growth that's seen not necessarily in numbers, but in strength in who you are. That we can stand, and after having done all, keep standing together, united as a body that is in unison according to your word, not one part out of joint or out of sync, but all working according to your perfect design. And we thank you that you've given us so much to serve you with, and that we can do that with joy and gladness of heart, as we recognize that you are our authority, and we submit wholeheartedly to you and make that declaration with boldness, and recognize the consequence of that declaration comes with effort. And we will do all that we need to do to keep serving you the way you've designed us to serve. And we bless and praise you in the wondrous and mighty name of the name that saves, Yeshua Messiah. Amen.